All right. So, a concept I kind of brushed over in a previous video was how I think the identity of allies and allyship is about as meaningful as the concept of queerness or being non binary. Yeah, and so I just wanted to unpack that a little bit more. So, I guess the way I would say it is like a capitalist conception of politics in like bourgeois electoral politics in, most capitalist countries. If you took the groups conservatives, liberals, and Marxists, the bourgeois framework would group liberals and Marxists together as being on the left and conservatives on the other side, in terms of like where the binary, where you go from positive to negative or whatever it is, where that switch point is, where you meet a difference in type as well as a difference in degree. That's where they put it. However, one of the things that kind of appealed to me about Marxism early on was that it gave you an ability to hate hippies who are clearly stupid without having to adopt conservative politics, which in a lot of cases are equally stupid. Usually not because they're conservative, but because they're capitalist. In fact, in a lot of ways, conservative politics essentially, like, it sees the world more accurately than liberal politics, because liberal politics is all about the delusion that a fundamentally unjust system can reform itself on its own terms. Whereas conservative capitalist politics just say, no, this is how it is, and it's a good thing that it's this way. And so, in that respect, they can be less deluded because they're dealing with material reality more closely, I would say. And the advantage of Marxism is being able to both have the clarity of conservative politics and the recognition of how class society operates and the brutality inherent in it, and that it can't be liberaled away. But then instead of identifying with that system, recognizing that it can be fundamentally challenged. And a lot of times, the way it can be fundamentally challenged has nothing to do with what the liberals are offering. The liberals and the left in general are obviously every bit as much of a control mechanism as the conservative. They just operate in a different way. For example, it would only be the liberals who could have pushed trans, I believe. I think if the capitalist class had like looked to the conservatives to popularize transgenderism, it would have instantly been torn apart. We wouldn't be talking about it anymore. It would have been a joke on The Daily Show for a couple of weeks. Each side of politics serves its purpose for bourgeois society. So, what the fuck does any of this have to do with allyship? Well, what I would say, we can see a lot in transgender politics that they take words that already exist, or they take concepts that already exist, and they either use the same word with a new ill-defined definition, or they come up with a new word to replace an existing old word. And so I think that's occurring with the term allyship, because to me, allyship sort of replaces the Marxist concept of solidarity, and they come from two fundamentally different places. So the thing about bourgeois liberals is they think ideas are what determine the world. They're as Boots Riley says, this is why I play this thing. Fishing villages create fishing songs, agricultural villages create agricultural songs. You can't come along to a fishing village and play a song about planting seeds and expect that you're going to create an agricultural village. The material conditions determine the superstructure. The economics determines the culture. And in a lot of ways, we can see this, with the trans movement, because the economics here is like a lot of times the left and right of a country will be two different massive blocks of capitalists. Like the Workers' Party won't really be a Workers' Party. It will be the party that represents industry that has a lot of workers who have fundamentally different economic interests to industries like tech that are capital heavy, I guess. So they form two different political blocks, and they use cultural issues to make it seem like there's popular support for this really like obscure debate about the minutiae of economics in order to stage an election. So because liberals think that it's ideas that change the world, and their politics are all about individual actions, be the change you want to see in the world, that type of thing, life, like individual lifestyle politics, I just don't consume that. I just have all these different little rules in my life, and the more obscure and intense I have my rules, the more dedicated I must be, because look at how hard I'm thinking about this. Whereas the Marxist kind of conception is about collective action to change, to make structural changes, and then the structural changes have cultural impacts. So that's two different things, like trying to purify everybody's brains versus to try and organize everybody together to be able to take collective action that changes things structurally. And in a lot of ways, they're completely counterposed, because when you're trying to organize a mass thing, then you need to make entry as accessible as possible. For example, if someone comes along to an anti-war protest and you want the anti-war protest to be as big as possible, then their position on abortion has to be irrelevant, because we're trying to get as much of a consensus around the anti-war thing here. But what liberals will want to do is try and have what's been called multi-issue, single-issue demonstrations, where you have to meet this checklist of every single issue on Earth to be pure enough to participate. And so, as a result, the two different models that have come out of these movements is solidarity and allyship. And solidarity works on the idea that oppressed groups can both mutually benefit from acting in concert with each other. And the movie Pride, about the Welsh miners' strike, is a great example of this. It talks about this organization, Lesbians and Gays Support the Miners, which was set up by this young gay socialist and other gay and lesbian people around him. But it was really the socialists who got it kind of kicked off, and you'll see why soon, because at the time that they launched the organization, the mining communities were so homophobic that when gays and lesbians support the miners collected money for the like literally starving miners, they wouldn't accept the money because they were so homophobic. And the film is about the process of like this mass organizing to try and break that down by focusing on the mutually beneficial goal, which is the gay people will mutually benefit if the miners aren't crushed, because everyone's working class, even if they are homophobic. Like, it's not about this, oh, you get a cookie for being like my friend. It's not about who deserves it. It's about what happens to them affects what happens to me. So with that understanding, it's out of like mutual self-interest that both groups are participating in this collectively beneficial process. Whereas the concept of allyship is that there is an anointed class, and then there are the people who basically have to make it up to them. And whether it's to the benefit of the ally or not is irrelevant, because it's not seen as a mutually beneficial arrangement. It's seen as payback. And it's for this reason that the idea of allyship is counterproductive to building social movements, I think. And I think a lot of genuine meaning people participate in the identity of ally in the same way a lot of genuine meaning people will participate in the concept of non-binary. But yeah, ultimately I think it's a destructive political force. I think it's liberal, bunch of hippie bullshit. It's a product of the exact thing that I hate.